Hello everyone, welcome to the stream. Today we're gonna build a tic-tac-toe game. If you want, you can check out the link in the description and see the demo. And by the end of this stream, I'm gonna post a link to the code that we will write today. Before we begin, let's get to know each other. So I'm gonna tell about myself, and I would like you to write in the comments or in the chat where are you from, and what is your experience with React and TypeScript, and why would you like to learn React with TypeScript. So, my name is Maxim Ivanov. I'm originally from Russia, now I live in Stockholm, Sweden, and together with Alex Bespoyasov, we wrote the book Full Stack React with TypeScript. It's very practical, very pragmatic book. It doesn't have much theory. We try to show all the concepts using specific examples, and the examples are complex enough to have some scale. It's not just like code snippets, it's actual applications. So what do we have? Okay, we even have someone from Russia, I believe. Okay, Alam uses React TypeScript at work. Great. Yeah, I also use React and TypeScript at work. Right now I work in Mojang, and the latest project where I used React and TypeScript is minecraftdungeons.net. So this website. It's actually written using React and TypeScript as well. Who else do we have today who also uses? Hey Ness, she uses React and TypeScript as well in Redux. Okay, nice. So a lot of people already know Redux, already know TypeScript and React. So what are we going to build today? Let's talk about this a little bit. We're going to build a tic-tac-toe application. It's going to be a gentle introduction into React and TypeScript realm. Of course, you will be able to ask questions about React and TypeScript if you have them. The app doesn't have any sort of artificial intelligence, so you have to play with yourself here. And the game only knows when we have a winner. How do we win here? Yeah, X won, start again, and then we can probably make a tie. I'm not sure how exactly could I do this? Probably this is a good way to make a tie. Yeah, okay, it's a tie. Whoa, Brazil, Toronto, Ukraine, Belgium, Poland. Okay, great, and a lot of people really have experience with React and TypeScript. Do you all like TypeScript, those who use it? I'm working and studying TypeScript. That's good. Okay, so this is the game that we are gonna build. We are gonna use only two libraries, I believe. We're gonna use Framer Motion to animate the states. If you open the game, you will see that everything is animated, has nice twins. And the screens transition from one to another with a twin. Okay, headed at first, love now. Yeah, at first it can seem intimidating, but then when you get used to it, you see that it really helps you a lot. Thailand. Hi, Boston. I would like to learn about conditional type. Okay, let's see if we will have an example here. So we're going to use, to build this application, we're going to use TypeScript. This is a typed superset on top of JavaScript. So basically it has all the features of JavaScript plus the ability of having static type definitions. Then we're going to use styled components to style the application. We will have to write a bit of styles today. And we are going to use Framer to animate the transitions. The application is fairly small. Let's try to first generate it, and then we'll plan what kind of screens will we have and start working on it, right? Anyone seeing video yet? Yeah, everyone should already see the video, Chuck. Okay, not sure about React 17 because I believe that Create React App still uses React 16 something something. Okay, cd workspace npx create React app. So the thing with Create React App is that it supports TypeScript out of the box. If you provide it, for those who don't know what is Create React App, it's a script that that generates the structure, the scaffold for your application. So you don't have to think about setting up the Webpack, setting up, like loading the resources, and so on, about the initial structure of your application and installing the proper version of React and setting it up. So we provide an argument called template, and it should be TypeScript. And then we specify the name of the application. I'm going to call it Tic Tac Toe stream. Let's wait until it creates. Yeah, let's see. If it uses React 17, then it's cool. On one side, React 17 did not add much, but if it's going to generate a React 17 based application, then I believe we won't have to use import React from React. That was quite annoying to do this every time you create a new component. But let's see. Okay, we have the application. Okay, it takes some time. I'm gonna go to this Tic Tac Toe stream. Right away, I will create a GitHub repo so you can track it. Git add. I think the initial commit is already done, so I will just run hub create Tic Tac Toe stream. Whoa. Okay. Now we have the link. I think for TypeScript you will still need import asterisk as React from React, but I can be wrong. First of all, for TypeScript you don't have to import asterisk as something something because of a special setting that I'm going to show you in a second. But before, let me send the link to the repo to the chat. What? Why is it not sending? Okay, sorry, wait a second. I was using a wrong input. I was trying to find an emoji with the name of my repo. Anyway, this is a link to the repo where we'll work during this stream. So you will be able to, I don't know, use it later. Now, we'll need to install Framer motion, and styled components. Yarn add Framer motion and styled components. How long will the stream last? I think it will take around 1 hour, maybe 1.5. It depends. It really depends on how much questions will I have. By the way, during the stream, you will be able to get the book about React and TypeScript with 20% discount. The link is in the description. So I have the styled components and Framer motion installed. We should be all set up to start working on the application. Now, let's see. We have the application structure. Oh, and we still import React from React. Maybe the template for TypeScript was not updated. And we can also check if the import React part is still needed. Yeah, for TypeScript at least, it probably is still required. Now that I have the repo, I'm gonna add everything. I'm gonna actually push you origin master. And then during the stream, I'm gonna update the repo so you can track the changes. Now, first of all, I'm gonna prepare the styles. Like, for example, we go to index.css and we can specify the background of the application to be, like, let's actually launch it and start working on this application. Yarn start. Okay. My NVM is acting up. Okay. Why don't I use CSS modules? I just prefer styled components, and also it's an opportunity to show how to work with libraries that require typings. So let's look at the Tic Tac Toe. It's gonna have 3 screens. One is for the game where we see the board. Then we have the reset game screen, and we have the main screen. That's one thing. We can go to README, remove the description, and start planning it. We need at least 3 components, probably more. Game screen, start screen, and reset screen. Is Yarn better than NPM? I would not say so. They're quite on par now. Then we have a bunch of things like this is custom font. I think it's, let me see what is the font here. Varela Round. We'll have to install it. So I propose we begin by setting up the styles that are global for the whole application. So first of all, we're gonna install the Varela Round font. How can we do this? I already have the link that I got from Google Fonts, and I'm gonna just include it into the public HTML. So when you create React application, you get the src folder with JavaScript files and the assets that should go with the source, with the JavaScript bundle. And then you have the public folder. It basically contains the static files that should be served by the server. One of them is index.html. It contains the layout of your application. And this is the file where we need to add the font link. I'm gonna copy it from another document and paste here and format the document. Now we should be able to use the Varela Round font in the styles. Next, let's go to index.css and specify the background. As you can see, it's a gradient background, and we're gonna define it using the background property. Background, it has it's a linear gradient with a 45 degrees angle. Actually, let's do it like this. And then it has 3 colors, 3 shades of blue. RGBA 26, 89, 158, and 1 at 0%. I don't need the hash here. Let's create two other colors. Here it's 70, 143, 224, and 1 at 42%. Whoa. 99, 166, and 241. Let's open the app. Let's go to the app.tsx, remove the layout, and we should start seeing our styles from index.css. Okay, right now the problem is that body has height 0. It's on the left corner. You can see that the height is 0. Let's go to index.css and fix it. We do it by defining another rule, HTML, body, and root, to have height 100%. Okay. And I probably have some typo in the background. Oh, good question. What does the smaller, bigger, like angular brackets thing do? So angular brackets in React is a fragment. It's something that does not render as any HTML element. For example, if you render div, let's say test, and then we open the app, and then you will look at the elements inside of the root component. You will see that we render exactly the same element as we did in React. If you render paragraph, like P, it will render a paragraph. But if we render a fragment, it won't result in any wrapping element. It's gonna just render the contents. Yeah, Lorenzo is already gave an answer. It's an empty tag that doesn't generate any tag in HTML. Exactly, that's what it does. But now I need to fix this problem with the background. Which program are you using? I believe you're talking about the editor, right? Then I'm using VS Code. So probably I forgot to set the last element. Okay, we have the background and we actually have this test element on the right, top right corner. We don't need it, we're gonna remove it soon. Next thing that I wanna do is I'm gonna start rendering something. Let's say we actually wanna start with the board itself. We don't need to start creating all the screens at once. We can start with one. And the first one is gonna be the game board. So, okay, I shouldn't have removed the fragment from here for now. Let's define the styled component that will represent our board. If you remember, it should be a white square with rounded corners. So this should be fairly simple to do. Let's call it board container equals styled. And now we need to import the style. Import styled from styled components. And here's the first issue with TypeScript. Some components provide the type definitions for themselves, for the libraries, and some libraries don't contain them. Style components don't have built-in type definitions. So we'll have to install them separately. Almost in 100% cases, if the component, like in majority of cases, if the component or if the library doesn't have the type definitions, you can install them from definitely typed package. And you do it like this: yarn add types, and then the name of the package that has missing types. Types, styled components. Now the error is fixed. And that's because when you open this package, it will jump to type definitions. And as you can see, it jumped into the types namespace. Otherwise, it didn't see them, and it was actually just a TypeScript error. So it just wouldn't allow us to compile the code. Now we can define whereas we have the types for styled components, we can define the styles for the board container. So it's going to be a div element, and with styled components, why I like them is that you actually write the real CSS rules. You provide the template string. This is one of the hacks. I don't know, not really a hack, it's actually a feature of JavaScript as a language. So if your function accepts a string, instead of passing it like this, and then you pass a string here, you can pass it as a template string, and then you can omit the brackets. I think it's kind of cool and creates this nice syntax. So first thing we're going to do is we are going to set the background to be white, or FF. Is it 6? No, it's 1 extra. And as you can see, I already see the color preview here. Why can I see it? That's because I installed the extension for styled components. This is the one. So instead of rendering it as a regular string, VS Code now knows that we are using styled components. Next thing we are going to do is we are going to specify the size of the element. Width 500 pixels, height 500 pixels. Okay, let's see what can we do now. We can render the board container, and let's render some string here. And go to our application. Okay, that's better. We still need to have the corners rounded, and we want to center it, to position it in the center of the screen. You better add types to dev dependencies. Yeah, that's a good point. If you open package.json, the structure that the app have generated already has the type definitions defined in the dependencies. And for uniformity with Create React App, I usually continue to do it like they did. There is a good point that type definitions are only being used when you... So the difference between dependencies and dev dependencies is that dev dependencies is something that should not go to production. And it is something that is used during the preparation stages, like when you compile or test your components. You can see it. You cannot see it here because Create React App does not create the dev dependencies block for you. It even puts jest related packages into dependencies. Anyway, I did it for the uniformity reasons. Overall, I do agree that types probably belong to dev dependencies, or they fit better. Anyway, for now it's not that important, but good catch. So we need to position this square in the center and round the corners. First, let's set the border radius to be 16 pixels. Then we specify the box shadow to be -6 pixels, 10 pixels, 30 pixels, 4, and the color should be, let's say oh no, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 3, 3. The last group is for the alpha channel. I think looks good enough. Now we need to position it in the center of the screen. I'm gonna do it in the index.css. So right now we have root element. If you open the inspector, you will see that we have body, and then inside of it we have the root, and then inside of it we render our block. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna center it using the flexbox properties. I'm gonna define a new CSS rule for the root element, and then inside of it I'm gonna specify flex direction column. That's because I'm also gonna add a title later, and I want them to be one on top of another. Otherwise, the default direction with flexbox would be row. Then I specify display flex align items center. It will position them in the center vertically, and then justify content center. That should do it. Let's go to React app. Okay, we have it centered. That's good. Now we need to, next task is to draw the grid. How are we gonna do it? So there are a bunch of options. How can you achieve this? You can actually draw the lines there. You can do it using CSS rules. So my idea was that I'm gonna specify another component called the board. We're gonna refactor it a little bit later. For now, let's just define the board. Okay, we actually need a semicolon here. It's gonna be another div. It will have the gray color. Nine 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 nine, and width 100%, height 100%. Is styled component only available in TypeScript? No. By default, it's like a JavaScript library. It doesn't even have the included type definitions. For example, Framer, that we've also installed, already contains the type definitions pre-installed, like shipped with it. If you go to A, B, C, D, E, F, Framer, motion, it has the types included. So some packages are being shipped with the types. Can vars go inside the styled component? Yeah, you can actually pass the props to it as well, but in this example the styles are pretty simple, so we don't really need to do it. So anyway, we have the board now. We can position another element inside of the board inside of the board container. Let's see how it looks like. Okay, and it covered the whole area. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna define a border. To be 20 pixels, which is quite a lot, but anyway, solid and white. I think 3 Fs is enough if we're just gonna use the white color. Okay, that's it. Next thing that we're gonna do, we want to have the cells. How do we do it? First, I'm actually gonna use the grid layout, and we just need to specify the grid template columns to be auto, auto, and auto. So we're gonna have 3 equally sized columns, and now we need to have 3 equally sized rows in our application. Let's do it. Grid, oh, this is an extra grid word here. Yeah. Grid columns and grid rows. That's good. And now we need to specify the gap between the rows and the columns, otherwise they will be stitched together. I'm gonna prove it first. So let's define another component. Const cell is gonna be styled, div, and let's say it's only gonna have the color. Background color red, just for the sake of testing how things will look. And now let's position 3 cells, 4, 3. It should take the whole, wait, what? I have the cell. Does it render them? Let's see. Yeah. I need to specify the display grid. Okay, and now it works. It automatically assigns the width and height to the elements. Yeah, display grid first. Exactly, Rivalex. To be honest, I was looking for more on TypeScript than basic React. Wait for it. We're going to prepare the styles and then dig into the TypeScript part. It's just, we want the app to look nice. So we have to specify the styles first. Anyway, we specify the cells, and as I said, they're now stuck together. And to separate them, I'm going to use another property called grid gap, I believe. Column gap 6px and row gap also 6px. Now we have the gaps between them. Now, how can we define the whole board? First of all, let's make the color white so it looks proper. And we can start creating components. Okay, it's white now. Let's move the board to another component. New file, board.tsx. And it's when you use JavaScript, you know that you can use JS or JSX interchangeably. It doesn't really affect anything. But with TypeScript, it really matters if you're using TS or TSX extension. The problem is that with TypeScript like React brings the JSX syntax that contains angular brackets. TypeScript also uses this angular bracket syntax, for example, for generics and also for typecasting, when you need to specify to change the type of some value manually, to override it. And as both of them use angular brackets, TypeScript typecasting. For instance, you can define a variable of specific type and then use this variable as another type. Let's say we have a of type string and define some value to it. Const a string some string value. Actually, I just did a stupid thing. I defined a TSX component where this won't work. That's exactly the reason why we have TSX components. Let's define a TS class. Example.ts. And here we have this const a string equals some string value. And then we have const b, that is a number. So we specify that this variable can only be a number. If we want to assign the value of a, which will be a bit nonsensical because the types don't match, but if we want to force into this situation, we can do this by saying number a, or we should be able to do it. TypeScript even says to us that conversion the string to number may be a mistake, and it's right. That's why we like TypeScript, because it looks at the syntax for us and says and announces, warns us about the potential mistakes that we could make. But that's I wanted to demonstrate the piece of the syntax that messes can have a syntactic clash with JSX. You see, we have angular brackets here, and we also have them inside of the JSX. So to disambiguate it, you can only use typecasting with angular brackets inside .ts files. In JSX, you can use it specifying a as number. TypeScript still complains that we should not do it, but this is the syntax that you can use in the JSX files if you want to manually force some other types on your value. Is it clear? Doesn't typecasting defy the whole concept of TypeScript? Yeah, that's a very good point. Usually it does. Usually you should not do this, but there are rare cases when it's just impossible to not do it. For example, when you get the value from some dynamic source, like you load it from JSON or you get it from the web server, like from the external source. Usually it's when your application gets the data from the external source. Then you have to manually typecast the value. But overall, if you use the code inside of your application, of course you shouldn't do these kind of bold statements. String as a number, of course you never do this. Let's remove the example.ts. I think we're done with typecasting, and we can define the board. We are still required to import React from React. I said that, like in the beginning, Arpan said that in TypeScript we have to use import asterisk as React, something like this. This is actually how React should be imported, because it doesn't have a default export. In ES6 modules, when you import the module that doesn't have default export. Let's actually prove it. React default export. No, not this. I'm gonna cheat here. I'm gonna get the first chapter. And I have it in the first free chapter. I actually have the explanation why does it happen. Okay, I'm gonna prove that I'm not a robot. Okay, let's see. I'm gonna download the book. Okay, let's do it like this. Let's open the first chapter. What are we building? Import asterisk. And here's where I'm talking about. Okay, this is the link, React source code. I've included it in the book because I also didn't believe it at first. But if you look at this, there is no default expert. You have a lot of named experts instead. So previously, like I think 1 year or 2 years ago, you really had to import everything, like all the individual exports as React from React. And the JavaScript community was actually already forcing one setting. Again, it's in the book somewhere. How did I get here? Allow synthetic defaults. Yeah. This is a setting in the compiler that actually changes this default, set of named experts and fakes it like it is a default expert. So this is why we can actually use both. We can use it like it's meant to be, sort of, but less beautiful, less concise, or we can use the fake version of it where the compiler fakes it for us. Okay, let's go. Now we need to move the board component here. I mean the styles for the container, like for the board itself. Let's move it to the board. This is going to be the component responsible for the board itself, for rendering the cells. We're going to call it board wrapper. And here we're going to export const board. So the board will be the logical component, something that will handle some game logic, and the board wrapper will be the styled component representing the board itself. We'll need to import styled from styled components. And the board is a React component. So now another TypeScript topic. How do you define React components in TypeScript? There are a lot of options. Like first one is to define it as a class component, which is not very popular way of defining components nowadays. The way you do it today, you define it as a function. But then you need to specify the type for it. And there are two options. First one is functional component. Actually, it's React functional component. Why did it do it? Function component. There is also a shorthand for it that is called FC, and we can automatically import it inside of React. It basically means the same, function component. Previously, there was also stateless functional component and SFC, respectively, two other types to define it, but they're deprecated now, because when the hooks were released, now functional components, they're not stateless, they can contain state. I prefer that shorthand, otherwise it's, I don't think you can be confused with this name and think that it's something else like football club or what. But of course you can do it the way you like. FC, and then you can specify the props of the component. So our board is gonna react on, it's gonna handle the game logic. And then it will need to tell the app, the higher level component, if the game ended with some result. Let's say we wanted to use the callback here, the prop that will hold the on game end. It's going to be a function. How do we define the props here? We do it by specifying a type for it. And there are two ways to do it. First one is to define an interface. Interface board props. Interfaces is a special kind of type, are special kind of types in TypeScript that allow you to only define the shape of an object. Class component not popular, what? Yeah, exactly. Class components are not popular anymore. So interfaces are a way to define shapes of the objects in React. And that's the only thing they can do. You can do it this way, interface and then the name of your component. If you work with the props objects and you have the component name that needs to have props, I usually just call it component name plus the word props. That's usually very easy to name it this way. Question, does FC go for Far Cry? If it would, I would use function component, but as there is no ambiguity with this, of course not. So we have board props interface. Now we need to define the on game end function. On game end is a function and it returns nothing. So we specify the return value to be void. And this function actually needs this callback that we're going to call inside of the board. Like there will be some logic that will calculate the winner and then we'll pass it to the parent component. So we'll need to pass the winner value. One way to do it would be to use maybe a string, but we know that we can only have, it's not really a string. And this is this term called the primitive obsession, when you use the primitive types. For example, string is a primitive type. Board props is not a primitive type. So primitive types is something the most bottom level of types, like booleans, numbers, strings are primitive types. It's not really good because you can be more eloquent with types if you create your own when possible. And in case of Tic Tac Toe, we know that there can be either X or O, and that's it. Also, it can be a tie, but we can specify for this as well. So first thing that we can do is we can define the cell types. What can be the content of the cell of Tic Tac Toe? And we define it using a type cell value, like the value that can be the value of the cell. And you can have, you know that we can have, the variable can be a string variable. But you can use the string itself as a type. In this case, if you say string var has a type of foo, the value itself, it can only have the value of foo. Like the string value can also be a type that will be very, very narrow, where only one value fits into it. You can think of types as boxes for specific values. So for example, string is kind of infinite, like it can have infinite variations, like a whole book can be a string, but some types are very limited. For example, it can be foo, and then if you specify another value to it, like bar, it will say, oh look, the types don't match. You can expand this definition of this type and say it can be either foo or bar, and then bar will work, but if you set another one, baz, it will stop working. But either foo will work or bar will work, and that's exactly what we want to do here. And by the way, this kind of type where you specify the kinds of, like you create a union of other types. Foo in this case is not a value, it's a type. Bar in this case is not a value, it's a type. And together, separated with this vertical line, they are a union type. This or that. One, and it is not limited to be only two values in this, two types in this union type. It can also be 3 or more, however many you would like to have. But enough with this. Let's define the cell value type. First value that it can have is x, or it can have y, not y, it can have o. What is the reason to call props with the name of component if the file only exports one component and there is only one props for it? That's a very good catch. You might, in some cases, you might need to export the component props because they're needed in some other place. And there can be name clash, name collision. This is why I usually append the component name props, and that's the reason. Can you explain the interface versus type? Yes, I'm getting closer to it. Let's define the cell value that is going to be x or o or undefined. And as you can see, we have already two ways of defining a type, kind of, because interface is also a kind of type in TypeScript. But the limitation of the interface is that it only can define the shapes of the objects. The type also can do it. Let's say board props type. You define it a little bit differently, but you can also specify the on, game, and winner, string, void. Problem is that the documentation does not. I believe it's still wrong, because it says that you cannot extend type definitions, but you can. And really, the only thing that I've noticed that types cannot do that interfaces can is that when you define the type to the interface 2 times, interface board props. As you can see, it is not an error. You can define an interface multiple times. And what it will do, foo string. And what it will do is it will actually merge the definitions. So now if I define the test object that should have the form of board props, and then I will try to assign a value to it, it will say that the type empty object, because of course I sent the empty object literal value to it, is missing the following properties from type board props: foo, on game end. So you see what it did? When I defined the interface with the same name 2 times, it just merged the definitions. That's what happens. You cannot do it with types, but the question is, why would you want to do this? So it's not props anymore, it's type, which should be used in component props. I didn't get the point, Igor, sorry. Okay, could you repeat the question? Because I think if you're talking about your previous question, oh, you had another one. Hey Max, please, I know you don't like decomposing styles to separate files, but it makes code more readable. Styles and styles TS file, components and components component name file. I cannot agree with separating them in styles and components, because I believe that things that change together should be put together. That really makes, at least for me, it makes editing and changing code easier. So I would move the styles, like right now I'm defining the styles in line along with the components. I would move them out, but for now I believe it's fine on this scale of application. It really depends on the scale. If it's only a few components, then it's fine. Later it becomes not fine. Extending interfaces in express response is a good use case. Yeah, that's a good point. In React though, in React Realm, where you mostly work with props and define types for the props of the components, I think type is a better option. Another thing, if you hover an interface, you will see only its name, interface board props. But if I remove the interface now, let's say I remove it, and now I'm gonna uncomment the board props type and hover it. Whoa, sorry. Now I can call it just board props and hover it. The VS Code will actually show the form of this type. I think this is more handy, so usually I prefer to use types for component props. Why should you use TypeScript instead of define the component prop types? TypeScript, as you could see, everything that I wrote before, works immediately as you type it. It analyzes the code without launching it. You don't need the runtime to see that the code is already wrong. It has errors in it. And with prop types, you will only know that something is wrong when you launch the app. And sometimes some components could be rendered on another page, or maybe on another state, or maybe loaded dynamically, because you can load chunks, like Webpack can split. You could use code splitting and have separate chunks and whatnot. And you can have errors that you can only find by clicking through the whole application. And with TypeScript, it's not an issue, because you don't have to launch the app. It just analyzes the syntax. And if the syntax is wrong, here you go. You should fix it. So let's continue. We have the board props, we have the cell value, and we need to specify the winner that can be either the cell value X or O, or it should be a tie. So I'm going to define another type here called winner, and it's going to be a cell value or tie. If you use TS, is using prop types redundant? I would say in most cases, yes, unless you know that your consumer, for example, you create a library that is going to be consumed by some JavaScript project and they don't have TypeScript, then yeah, you might want to use both of them. Otherwise, if you're just writing the, how do you call it, the end product, something that is facing the users, then I don't see any point in using prop types. TypeScript covers this case pretty well. Okay, So let's remove this test. And now, how do we specify the props of the component? We define the props form, that it's an object that contains onGameEnd function that receives the winner that has the winner type. Now, we pass it as a generic argument to functional component. Board props. And now, TypeScript automatically calculated that the onGameEnd that we got here by destructuring the props object has the type winner of winner type, and it's a function that doesn't return any value. So this is what TypeScript does for you. Okay, we have a React component, but it needs to render something, and the board needs to actually render the board wrapper. And then inside of it, we want to render the 9 cells that we have. Can the logical OR you used in type be used in interfaces? As I said, interfaces can only define the form of an object. They're even defined a bit differently. So when we define an interface example, there is no equal sign. You just state the name of the interface and then the shape of it. Like, for example, it has the field called foo, and that can have the value bar or 1 or an array of strings. This you can do, but overall, interface can only be used to define a shape of an object. Types in TypeScript, unlike interfaces, can be used to define unions, intersections, forms of the objects like we did here. They're more versatile. So usually I prefer using types. My idea is that if you're exporting components props, something is wrong. These component properties must be described using common types that can be declared in a file src types. That's a valid point. I agree with it. But yeah, to be honest, it's really a sign that something might be wrong, and maybe you should define a common component. But then it imposes another question, like, what if you're risking to create the types file that will be full of all sorts of types there, and oftentimes it can really be logically the props of the component that some other part of your code needs to know. So it's not always true. I can agree with it, but only partially. When to use interface or type? I would say use type by default nowadays, because it's more versatile. That's my point now. Does the book contain a section for commonly encountered errors? It doesn't have a dedicated section for errors, but every time you could face an error, it explains that this could happen if you did not do this. So it kind of has it spread all over the chapters, because we use example-based approach in this book. Rob Brennan, yeah, I think I agree with Rob here. I agree with the idea, but I like to keep props close to the source, the component in this case, and not a long list of types. Exactly. The problem comes with any sort of shareds. When you have a folder called shared components, for example, it usually becomes sort of a garbage bin that is unmanaged, and you have like all sorts of things happening there, no structure. And same happens with the types, because there is no logic in putting specific things there, and you will end up with a huge file with all sorts of types. So I think I'd rather use the board props approach. Anyway, it's kind of a topic for the Holy War. Here you go. Now we need to define the state to represent the board. We need to represent the list of cells somehow. How can we do this? There are several ways you can achieve this. One way would be to have two-dimensional array. I would probably go with this approach with a bigger field if it would be harder for me to think of it as a like one-dimensional array, just a flat array. But in this case, I will just go with an array. So I'm going to define an array of cells. I'm going to use a hook called useState. Cells, set cells equals useState. And with useState, you can specify the value of the state here through the generic property. So in this case, I know that my array of cells will be an array of cell values. So I specify it like this. Then I need to provide the default value, which is going to be actually not an empty array. It's going to be an array of 9 elements, which are filled with undefined. And I need to import useState from React. Now I have the cells array that I specify to be an array where each value can be either X or O or undefined. Undefined is when the cell is empty, or X when the cell has some value. Now we can render it. So we go to the layout and render cells, map, cell, index. Whoa, what is happening? Now inside of it we render the cell component, and we already have defined it. I just need to move it to the board. Don't worry, we are gonna move it to a separate file later, because this component will have some logic, so we'll do it just in a second. For now, we will define it in this file just for the testing purposes. I'm gonna go to app.js, remove the cells, make it a single tag component, import the board from its file, and we need to specify the on game end, and it for now is going to be just a void function, just for now. Now inside of the board, we'll loop through the cells array that we have defined as an array of undefineds, and we render the cells. Why is TypeScript complaining? Oh, I have a wrong arrow here. This is why. Now we need to specify, as we are mapping through the elements, we need to specify the key. Key equals I. And for now, this is it. I think we can try to test it. I'm going to remove the tests file. And let's open the React application. Okay, here you go. So this is the layout. Our board has dark, I would say it's dark gray, medium gray background, and then we have 9 cells here. Let's define the cell component, so it's going to be interactive. New file, cell.tsx, import React from React, export const cell is going to be a functional component. And let's see if we have any more comments in the chat. What is the reason to store tests separately from components? Well, that's a hot discussion. So we have the cell component here. I'm gonna go to the board, and as I said, the cell style will actually go to the cell module. It's gonna become cell container because it just represents the style now, and the component itself is a cell. I need to import the styled from styled components. Yeah, I can do it by auto importing it. And now we need to define the props for the cells. Each cell has a value, either undefined if it's empty, or X or O. It also has the toggle callback. When you click on it, it needs to call it and let the board know that the value in one of the cells have changed. And also it needs to know it needs to know its index. So when you toggle it, it tells the board the index of the toggled cell. So let's do it. We need to define the props type cell props equals. It has a value, cell value, and we define the cell value inside of the board, and it clearly belongs to the cell. So the cell is more related to the cell value than the board. So we export it. And we export it because the board needs to use the cell value to calculate the winner. The winner is the type that the board uses, but it depends on the type of the cell. So import it from the cell. Now we go back to the cell. We need to know the value. Which value does the cell hold? We need to know the toggle. We need to know the toggle callback. It has an index that is a number, and it returns nothing, this callback. Usually callbacks don't return anything. They're meant to only notify the higher level components. And we also have an index, which is a number. Now we can say that the cell has the cell props, and for now we need to return at least cell container. That will do it. Now if you open the board, you will immediately see that the TypeScript is complaining at us. What? Do we export cell? Export const cell, okay. How do we tell it to import? Add cell to existing import declaration from the cell. Yeah, exactly, that's what we want. And now TypeScript complains that... What? This is weird. Value equals cell. Index is bad for keys. Yes, index is bad for keys. In this case, what would you do? We generate the cells here. It's not something that comes from the backend. It's not something that will have unique value. It's like they won't change the order. So I would say it's one of the cases when you can use index safely and nothing bad will happen. Oh, thank you, Luis. Where did you define cell container? That's a very good question. Initially, it was the cell, but now I moved the styles to the cell container and used it inside of the cell here. So we are missing toggle and index. The index is also going to be I. And the toggle, for now, let's say it's going to be just an empty function. That's it. So one of the things that TypeScript is good is at telling you that you're missing some props in your component. That's one of the most useful things that it does. Now, inside of the cell, we can actually start rendering the values. Cell container should have a bit more styles. First of all, it needs to be clickable. Right now I'm using div, but it's better to use a button. And now, as you can see, it has borders, and if I click it, it will have the outline. Let's remove it. I'm going to update the styles. First of all, margin bottom -1. It is to fix the layout a little bit. Otherwise, there would be an additional border in the bottom. Border none. Cursor pointer. What? Cursor pointer. Outline. None. Okay, that's good enough. Okay, now we don't see the outline and the border. Okay, let's continue. Now the cell can also have the value, the cell value. We need to render it inside of the cell container. Cell container, and inside of it we're going to do the following. We're going to get the props, destructure them, get the value, and as you can see, we're getting the suggestions from the TypeScript because it already knows the form of the props that we're going to get. If you hover it, it will tell that the value is the cell value. And you can jump to the definition of it and then jump and see what is the cell value. X, O, or undefined. Okay, so here we need to check if the value equals, and here is another neat thing. You see that we've defined cell value to be X or O. So now if you compare it to something, TypeScript will tell you that you can use one of two values, one of two X or O. So here we want to check if it's O, then we render the big O symbol. Later we'll use the actual O graphic. Otherwise, you need to check if the value even exists. If value equals O, then we render big O. Otherwise, if value exists, we render big X. Otherwise, we render null. For now, we only want to see the app to compile, and it works. And we can try to define the on toggle by specifying the on click and passing a function to it that will call toggle, that we'll get from the props, and pass the index to it. Toggle with index. Now, if we go to the board and then we pass the right toggling function, is that property hint built into VS Code or is it an extension? It's a built-in thing. I forgot how to turn it off because I think I should have turned it off for this stream. So let's go, where did I stop? I was specifying the toggle function. Let's do it. The app, inside of the board, we need to specify a function that will be called toggle cell. It's gonna receive the index. That will be a number. And then we pass the toggle cell function to it. If we would actually say that index is a string, why did I do it? We would already get an error because the function signatures wouldn't match. You see, inside of the cell, we defined the toggle to be a function that receives index that is a number as an argument. So now, if we want to pass something to the toggle prop, it needs to have exactly the same signature. So in this case, index should be a number. Now, to toggle the cells, we need to go through call the set cells to update the state. And now we're going to do it in an immutable way. To do it, I'm going to map through the cells for each cell and cell index. I need an extra round bracket. And then I'm going to compare if the I equals index, then I return let's say x. Otherwise, I return the value that the cell has before. So now we should be able... Did I do something wrong? Yeah, it was bracket mismatch probably. Now I should be able to toggle everything as an X. That's good, that's some progress, but we need to be able to alterate between X and O's, right? So, to do this, we need to keep the current moving shape. And we don't actually need to have another state for it. We can calculate it from the cells array. So the cells array, if we filter out the undefines, we will know the amount of moves made. So let's do it first. I'm already starting to calculate a new value. So current shape is a cell value, so it can be X or O or undefined. And we get it by using cells filter. And here I'm going to pass an identity function. And the idea is that if the cell value is undefined, then it's going to be filtered out because it's going to be falsy. Undefined will be cast to false. And then we can get the length. And to decide if it's X or O, I mean the current shape, we can just take the absolute value of the modulo of 2. And then if it's zero, if it's not 0, then it's O. And if it's 0, then it's even, and then it means that it's O, or if it's odd, then it's X. And the X should be small. And the 0 should be O. I'm sorry, it's a typo. That's why TypeScript is very nice. Otherwise, look, I could easily, visually, 0 looks pretty much like O. It's very easy to make such a mistake, right? But not with TypeScript, because TypeScript says, look, you have an error. 0 is not assignable to type cell value. Boom. Already something useful. I didn't do this typo intentionally. That's just something that can happen to you as well. And TypeScript will actually help you. Now, instead of the hard-coded X, let's pass the current shape. Okay, now we can go back to the app. And every time we click on different cells, the value will be altering. Can I have a quick sneak peek at your app component? Is it better designed with enum for cell value? That's another alternative. You can also do this, but in this case, I thought that probably it's a union type. So here is the app.tsx. Right now it only has a board container. Okay. Now we need to be able to calculate the game end condition, and we do it inside of the board on game end. How can we calculate the game end condition? We do it by defining the winning conditions. Basically, a winning condition is when one of the columns, any of the 3 columns, or any of the rows, or any of the diagonals have the same values. So first, let's define the winning condition array. Const winning conditions equals an array of 0, 1, 2. That's the first horizontal line. 3, 4, 5. Whoa, 3, 4, 5. And 6, 7, 8. So any of those 3 have the same values, like all of them are X's or all of them are O's, then this symbol won. Let's call it horizontal. Now, if 0, 3, or 6, or 1, 4, or 7, or 2, 5, or 8 are also filled in with some symbol, then it's vertical. And now we have 2 diagonals. So I remove the last symbol, the last array, and call it diagonal. And diagonals are, for example, 0, 4, and 8, and 2, 4, and 6. It's diagonals. And here is another fun thing. For example, if I format the document, it's gonna be uglified, and like that's not what we want. So I'm gonna use the prettier ignore here. Now if I format the document, this whole block is ignored, and it's nice and easy to read. We have horizontal lines, we have vertical lines, and we have diagonals. Now we need to determine if we have any of them containing the X's or O's. How can we do this? We do it. Let's find out. Let's find the condition, and by condition I mean one of those arrays. Let's find the condition that won any of the lines. So let's define const winning condition with 2 n's. Winning condition, and it's winning conditions filter find. We need to find one that matches the requirements. Let's call the argument cond. Inside of it, we will first calculate the actual line value. I mean, we will take the indices from the condition, like index 0, 1, and 2, the top horizontal line, and then we'll create another array that is filled in with the actual value. So for example, if the first line is empty, it will be undefined, undefined, undefined. You see the point. Win conditions, actually cond condition map. I map through each index, cell index, and then return cells in this cell index. This way the line is a result, the actual values of specific winning condition array. Let's see what is next. I accidentally closed the YouTube Studio, so I cannot see your comments. Wait a second. Where is the comments? Okay, here you go. Okay, now we have the winning line, and we can calculate the actual condition. Return. We are trying to find the winning condition by checking if every cell in calculated line. Let's actually draw a diagram. So let's say here is the game board. Oh, that was a stupid idea. Let's forget about it. I won't be able to draw the X and Y's there. Anyway, let's say we've calculated the values of the first row, and now we need to check that all of them are equal and not undefined. So it means that all of them are X's or all of them are O's. We do it by checking that the line first element is truthy, is not undefined, because if it's undefined, then it means nothing. It means that no moves were made before. And then I check that every cell value equals line 0. So first we check that the first item of this potentially winning line is not undefined, and then we check that all of the other cells in this line are equal to this first element, which will mean that they're actually equal between each other. Is everyone still there? I don't see your comments. Is everyone here? Okay. Now that we have the winning condition, one of the conditions that is filled with X's or O's, we can calculate the winning shape. Const winning shape, and it's calculated by getting winning conditions, or if it exists, then we get the cell's value from this winning condition 0. So if we have a winning condition, then we take the first element of it, which will be an index of some cell, and we get a cell value from this position. Otherwise, if we don't have any winning conditions, any winning combinations, then we just return undefined. Winning shape should not be any, to be honest. There is a mistake somewhere. Winning condition contains numbers or undefined. Line contains cell values. Okay, that's good. Then return line 0 and line every cell value that will be cell value. Okay, winning conditions is either array of numbers or undefined. Okay. Cells contains of cell values. Oh, sorry, that's just a stupid typo here. And now it's cell value. That's called the type inference. So we didn't define the type of the winning shape. While we could actually say that the winning shape can only be a cell value. We don't really need to do this because TypeScript can infer it automatically. If you were listening to what I was doing a few seconds ago, because I was very confused when I did this typo here, I was confused because the winning shape is now any. And I started traversing the type inference process, like how TypeScript was thinking about it. And I realized that, yeah, that was a typo. And TypeScript actually does it correctly. So first we calculate the winning line that of course contains the cell values because we take the indices of the winning combination and just get the values of them from the board. Then we check that like we're trying to find the winning combination, which is an array of numbers. We defined it as an array of arrays of numbers. And it can be undefined. Look at this. It automatically derived that it's either an array of numbers or undefined. Why? Because the find can return undefined. Like if find doesn't find anything, you get undefined. And then we return the and then we calculate knowing the winning condition, the winning combination, maybe I should have called it, we can get the value of one of the cells in this combination and assign it to the winning shape. We can also calculate the tie condition, const tie, and the tie happens when all the moves are made and no one still won. Cells, filter, C, length equals 9, which is field size. Yeah, okay, I see everyone is here. Thank you, folks. Really appreciate it. For a moment, I thought that something is wrong with connection, and I kind of got scared. Anyway, let's continue. We are making a good progress. Now we know that we have a winning shape, X or O, or we have a tie. And again, TypeScript does a lot of type inference for you. Some people like to take full responsibility over the types they're using, so they always specify the types of the values. I don't really like it. So you could say that, yeah, you know that what I'm doing, Boolean. You know already that the tie will be Boolean, so you can specify it manually. But you can just let it be without type definition, and then TypeScript will automatically defer that it's a Boolean, because when you filter out all the items, I'm actually not sure. Wait a second. Look at this. Let's say we have an array of 2 undefineds, and we take the length. The length is 2. So we need to filter out the empty cells, because the array of cells always equals the length of the array of cells is always 9, because we have 9 cells. It's there, they can just have the value of undefined, but it is still a cell. This is why we're doing filter, to have, like, for example, let's say undefined, and now we call filter cc length. Boom, 0. You see what I did here? So I filtered out the undefined values. If there would be any value that would be not undefined, like 1, then the length will be 1. whoa, 2 items, then 2. This is how it works. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, undefined is false, and I actually use the same technique here to calculate the length of field in cells divided by modulo of 2 to get if it's even or odd. If it's even, then we use O as a value. If it's odd, then we use X. Okay, let's continue. Now that we know that there is some condition that says that we won the game or we have a tie, we need to tell it to the app. And as you remember, if you were here from the beginning, we passed the onGameEnd callback. How do we call it? I would actually do it using a use effect. So we need to import it from React. The use effect is usually calling side effects. Like in our case, we need to call a callback when some conditions are met. So if winning condition, oh actually no, if we have a winning shape. If winning shape, then return on game end with this winning shape. What? Winning shape. If a tie, then return on game end with a tie. And then we need to observe a bunch of things. We need to observe the winning shape. We need to observe the value of the tie, the boolean. And also we need to observe the onGameEnd, because we have the exhaustive props ESLint configuration thingy that will actually, let me show you. Let's try to see if, yeah, you see, React hook use effect has a missing dependency on game end, either include it or remove a dependency array. So we have this warning. So to fix it, we just pass on game end. I think it's better to use undefined filter boolean. I think it's a matter of preference, but your way is shorter. It will also work because it will just cast the value. This works because if you pass undefined to a boolean, you will get a boolean value of false. And when you pass the functions to the, how do you call it? To filter, for example, or to some other processing functions, you can omit the brackets. So yeah, it will work. I think I actually like it more. Yeah, I think it reads better. Okay, now we know when the game should end. So we call the onGameEnd. We can go to the app, and onGameEnd we can change some state. Okay, we have a lot of spam going on somehow. Okay. What is next? Next we need to specify to switch the screens depending on the winning condition. So if the game have ended, we need to change some sort of state that will allow us to show the winning screen or the game end screen. Const winner set winner equals use state winner. So here we need to know the winner to show on the screen that O won or X won or anything like that. And also we need to specify the game state and set game state setter to be use state one of the game state values. Initially it's going to be start. So what is my idea? Let's first import the use state. I'm going to have a type game state, and it's going to have the start or game or reset value. So when the game state has the value of start, then we show the start button. If it's the game, then we show the game board. If it's reset, then we show the message telling who won and the reset game button. Hello, Luchnik Diaghilev. Welcome to the stream. So how is it going, everyone? Are you following? Like, is everything clear? If you have any TypeScript questions along the way, you can ask them. And how about we make a very short break? Like I need just a few seconds. Wait for me for 2 seconds. And if you have questions about anything that I wrote so far, just feel free to ask. Open the cells components, then go. Sorry, I already went and came back. Yeah, let's go to the cells component. What was the question, Mohammed? When do you stream? Do you stream weekly? Yes, I usually stream on Wednesdays. I did it 3 times already, so usually it's exactly the same time as today, every Wednesday. So let's continue. Right now, what are we trying to solve? Just a quick reminder. We already can calculate when the game have ended, and we know that it's a tie or some shape have won. If you open the board, you will see that we have tie condition calculation, where we basically count the amount of filled in cells, and if it's 9, then it's a tie, then no one won before. Then we calculate the winning shape, and we do it by checking against the winning conditions. And winning conditions are the array of rows, columns, and diagonals. For Visual Studio Code, are there any recommended plugins when working with TypeScript? I would say that no, you don't really need anything, because TypeScript is supported out of the box when you work with VS Code. You can just start working with it immediately. Really what you need to do, and I would encourage you to do it probably, is to run the npx create react app template TypeScript and then the name of your app. That's it. That will do. It will generate the file structure, which is very similar to what you would have with regular Create React App application, except for instead of JSX, you will have TSX files. And then everything else I'm trying to cover in this video, like for example, how to create props for your component. And before that, I said that now you can use interfaces. It's fine, it will work. But when you use types and you hover them, you see the form of this type. If board props would be an interface, let's actually move it down a little bit. If the board props would be an interface, then let's say you hover it. How do you know the shape? It's not nice. It's not that nice. So I prefer to use types as props. Ahmed, at time 7 p.m. Central European Summer Time, something like this. What is the difference between returning from useEffect and not returning and just performing the action? So it really depends on having the dependency array. So look at this useEffect. For example, here, if you would return a function, for example, or you would do it here, then it would be called on every re-render. Without dependency array, the returned function would be called on every mount unmount. I think I missed the CSS to align the X's and O's at the center of the cell. What attribute did you guys use? We didn't use anything yet. We didn't do it. Look, oh wait, I broke stuff. What did I do? What I was showing? How did I manage to break things? Who can tell me? Where is the typo? Okay, return plus, okay, yeah, I was showing a function, sorry. And now we are in the app. Yeah, let's get back to the app first. So we need to be able to see who actually won. So we will store the winner, and we need to define who is the winner. Type winner. Did we define it in the board yet? Yeah, we already have the type winner. Let's export it from the board. And then in the app, we are gonna import it from the board. And also we need to know what is the game state. Here is how are we gonna do it. Hi Artyom. Winner at app.tsx. Yeah, thank you for reminding. So now we need to show one of the three screens here. Basically we have a switch condition. We have one of three states: start, game, and reset. Each of them has a dedicated screen state. To use it, we're going to define and render an object that will render different values by the keys depending on the game state. So we now have the state called start, and let's say it's gonna be just a fragment for now saying start. We have a state called game, and we have a state called reset. As you can see, before we added the last one, TypeScript was complaining and saying the reset does not exist on type start, blah, 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 yada, yada. So we specify the reset. So we know that if it's the game state, then we'll actually render the board Okay, if it's start state, why the board is not a function? Why the board is not a function? Why would it be a function? We just render one of the JSX elements. You don't really need it. So start can be a, let's say it's a button. And on click, it's gonna do the following. It's gonna set game state to game. Format the document. Okay, so initially that's the game start screen. If I click start, it will switch to the game. To make it look nicer, we can use Framer. Isn't the tie function tells if the game is over or not tie, right? No, not really. We have two things can end the game. First one is all the cells are filled, so obviously we cannot make any more moves. Or one of the players filled in one of the lines, like either diagonal or vertical or horizontal. So there can be like two conditions. One we check by calculating the currently winning shape, and we do it by looping through all the winning conditions and applying each of them to the board and seeing, like, if we take the diagonal, does it have all the cells filled with the same character? If yes, then it's the winning character. What is the reason for you to use the wrapper for the board but container for the cell? That's just an inconsistency. That's a very good catch. Let's call everything a wrapper. I think this happened because in my head, wrapper and container. What happened? Wrapper and container is something like very closely related. So one of my neurons fired and said, "Oh, it's container. Let's call it a wrapper." Use effect is that like JSX for a switch statement? Haven't seen that before. Yeah, I actually quite like it. The construction that you see here, an object, and then you pass the value, and you understand how it works, right? We have an object where keys are possible states, and the values are the actual results that we want to render, pieces of JSX, and then when we take the value from it, which will be game state, can be start, game, or reset, just like keys in this object, and then we just return one of the values. I think it's quite elegant. What do you think? Yeah, that's VS Code, and the theme is called Material Theme Ocean High Contrast. That's what I'm using. But anyway, let's make it look nicer, look a bit nicer. Let's animate the elements. And also let's make a start screen a separate file. Start screen, import React from React, export, const, start screen. It's going to be a functional component. FC, and I think it needs, but is it TypeScript? This part is just supported by TypeScript. If you have any specific TypeScript questions, we can talk about that. We define the start screen component, which is a functional component. You need to import the FC from React to be able to use it. I believe that we need only one prop here, which is callback that will set the game state to game state. I think we should call it onStart. Type, let's define a type for the start screen props equals on start. It's a void function. By the way, if you want to, we can actually look into the book examples. Like the book that I wrote, it has a lot of examples. I also have it on my machine here. CD, workspace, full stack, React, TypeScript, code. So we can take a peek into it as well. Like this stream, initially when I was working on the app for it, I was thinking of it as a something like very entry level to just introduce you to React and TypeScript. But then I quickly realized in the beginning when I asked you folks like what is your TypeScript level, and a lot of people said, well, we work with TypeScript. Like I worked with React and TypeScript for a year, and I was like, whoa, okay, that's not what I expected. I expected people who are just wanting to get started with React and TypeScript, and I thought about some very, very gentle introduction where there is not so many TypeScript features. But also I want to make a note, kind of a confession, like if you think that if you will switch to TypeScript, there will be a lot of additional things on top of just regular programming, it's not really always the case, and you can still continue to write it's not necessary to write much more code because TypeScript does a lot of type inference for you, as I was showing in a bunch of functions here, like when I was calculating the winning conditions on the board. Doesn't this elegant way create a new object on each render? Then the reconciliation algorithm will trigger re-rendering of the children each render cause of new objects. Yeah, and until it's a problem, I think it's fine. And then you can, like for example, if it becomes a okay, so it's easy to read, and until it's a problem, it's fine to use it this way. That's the point. What's up, dude? Are you still working as a teacher in Loft blog? No, not really. I stopped working there. Okay, but let's continue. So now we know that we can render the start screen, and we can pass the onStart function from it. The start screen will contain the start button, start screen, yes, please don't be like a handful of past clients where they have decided to use TypeScript and most of their code base uses type any. That's a very good point as well, because then you lose the whole point of using TypeScript. I think by default, if some element, there are two options that is good to turn on when you work on TypeScript project. No implicit any is one of them. So either you use strict, which includes the no implicit any, or you use no implicit any directly. And it will track if at some point you will, for example, by inference, it will calculate that some value, some variable type is any, which is not good because it really can tolerate any value. For example, let foo have any type. And let's say the initial value will be some string. Then let's say foo is now a number 2. And then let's say foo is now an array. So now you don't have any type checking at all. TypeScript doesn't care. You said that foo can be anything. And now it indeed will accept any sort of value. I want to say in all cases, you can avoid using any. And if there is some value that, for example, you get from parsing a JSON file, it's better to use unknown. That's another type that also accepts any sort of attributes, but it's at least more truthful that it's not any, it's just an unknown type. Okay, but let's continue. Now we have the start screen, and it will render a button, return a button, that will say start. We need to specify the start screen props. And here we need to get the onStart function. Again, it's very handy that TypeScript already knows that we can accept the onStart prop here. On click, we're gonna use the onStart. And actually, we can pass the onStart here as a function. And now we need to make sure that we pass the onStart function to it. OnStart equals onStart. Const onStart equals a function where you define the game state by using setGameState to be game. And again, we got a suggestion of what kind of values can we use here. And if we try to set it to some other value, like foo, you will get an error. So we specify the game to be, the state to be game. And now, on game end, we need to specify another callback. Set winner winner. I believe that winner should have the type winner. And we also need to reset the value, reset the game state. So we call the set game state to be reset. It's a bit different screen, and let's define it as well. Reset screen. Here we want to specify the winner and on restart or on reset. Const on reset equals a function that sets the winner to undefined and game state to game. You can use undefined because winner can be unknown or undefined. And set game state should be game. Now let's define the reset screen. New file, reset screen.tsx. import React from React, export const reset screen equals a component. As you remember, we're passing a winner and on reset. Winner, I actually am going to pass the winner value now, and the on reset function. So we need to have two props, winner and on reset. Reset screen. Render or return, and it's also going to be a button, but we need to wrap it into a fragment because it's going to contain a header saying who won and a button saying reset the game. So we define a header h2 and a button. Do you give personal lessons or maybe code review? So first of all, kind of not really. I'm launching my own personal course. It's Tractor School React. It's in Russian. If you speak Russian, then it might be useful for you. The mentoring is included there, but I don't sell mentoring per hour. You see what I mean? Cool material. Every time you say winner, it sounds like winner. I'm not. Okay, if it's funny, I'm glad. I'm glad for that. That's unintentional though. Anyway, on reset screen, we want to show the. Now I'm afraid to say this word. Thank you, Stefan. Anyway. We need to specify the reset screen props. Type reset screen props. It's a winner, and the winner has the type winner, and on, how did we call it in the app? Reset screen on reset. And on reset is a function that returns void. On reset is a function. Look at this, by the way. You see what I did here? There are two ways of defining function types in TypeScript. One way is to define it as a function field, and then you just on the key, you specify the brackets to say that it's going to be a function, and after the colon, you specify void as a return value. Or, alternatively, you can say that this property, called unreset, is a function, what I'm doing, that returning void. It doesn't have to necessarily return void, it can return any value. I mean, the function can return any value. For example, if you have a function, let's call it returning strings, then we can say that return value of this function is a string indeed. And now, until we actually start returning strings from this function, TypeScript will complain that we are not returning anything, and the type, the returning type, should be either void or any. That's the problem with any. It accepts anything. In this case, if we return foo, for example, the function will become valid. So as you can see, this is one of the options on how to define functions in TypeScript. You can do it this way. And honestly, I prefer this syntax because it's more compact. You can do it either way, like how you prefer. Let's remove this useless function. Oh, another thing. Let's talk about TypeScript a bit more, because yeah, there was a lot of CSS, there was a lot of component creation. Let's talk about TypeScript for a little bit. You might have noticed that when we create functional components, we use this FC type, and then we use these triangular brackets. What are those triangular brackets? Those are generic arguments. What are those? Let's say you have a function that is called log string, and it accepts the value that is a string. It returns nothing, it doesn't have any return type, and inside of itself, it performs a side effect that is calling log. It's just a wrapper around the logger. Good. Now let's say that in your application you now want to also log numbers. How can you do this? You can define another function, of course. Function log number, and then you have a value that is a number, and then you console log value. But creating a function for every type is quite cumbersome. It's a lot of extra work that is unnecessary. What you can do, you can say, I have a function that needs to work with some type, some kind of type. And you define the variable like this, variable type t. So before the function is actually used, this t type that we've just defined is unknown. It only has the referential equality, so that t equals t. That's it, nothing more. We don't know anything else about its properties. We can give TypeScript more information. We can say that t extends string. Then TypeScript knows that t is some sort of descendant of the type string. Will you consider an English version of your Russian course on Tractor School or any other platform? Probably in half a year or maybe a year, yes. Remote work with Tyler Durden asks if the remote work with Western companies is possible for junior level without commercial experience but with English and personal projects. Actually tomorrow I'm gonna have a webinar on this for this school, where I'm gonna explain a bit more about that Russian speaking course. And usually it's a popular question in Russia and in Belarus and Ukraine on how to immigrate to Europe, for example, or to America. And in my experience, you usually need to have some amount of years of experience. For example, in the company I work now, I live in Sweden, in Stockholm, and I work in a consultancy, and they require at least 4 years of experience. So that's just the reality of it. There is a chance that some company will actually accept a junior developer remotely, but it is more likely that they will require you to have a certain amount of years of experience. How useful is showing your C++ roots? I didn't get that point about C++ roots. How useful is TypeScript for apps that mainly depend on API JSON responses? I would say it's useful for any sort of app because it allows you to ensure the contract of your application's modules. So as you could see throughout this app development that we were developing right now, it ensures that when you use some component, you use it exactly as this component is intended to be used. If you use some module, exactly, it ensures that it is used properly. So in this app, we don't have any network requests. We don't store any state in local storage, or we don't save anything to the disk, to the hard drive. But in the book that I was showing you a few examples, we actually, almost every app has some sort of communication with the server. So for example, when we're building the Trello board, it saves the data on the backend. And it's good to have an API wrapper that supports TypeScript, so that when you get the data from the server, you actually know what kind of data is it. So TypeScript is useful because then in your app you use this data correctly and you ensure that you don't have errors. Or for example, how do I see other chapters? Can I see the GraphQL? Yeah. For example, in GraphQL with TypeScript is extremely useful because you already have the type information from the API. So in this chapter, I'm actually building a console terminal-based CLI client for GitHub that allows you to create repositories, pull requests, issues. And what I did for that chapter is I was showing how to download the GraphQL schema definitions, the schema definition of the kinds of responses that you can get and kind of mutations that you can call. Because of the... Oh, sorry, I got distracted. You get the schema that is defined on the server, you get it locally, and then you can derive the TypeScript definitions from it. You see? So if the backend already knows the form of the data or the type of the data that is going to return to you, you can automatically create the types for your application using it. And I'm showing how to do it there. Or, for example, I believe in the Redux. There is a Redux chapter, yeah, Redux with TypeScript, where we build a drawing application. We also save the data on the backend. And again, it's very useful to know exactly like what can you get. Sometimes if you process the network requests, you can forget that your backend can actually return an error. And then instead of processing it correctly and failing gracefully, showing some nice error to the user, nice error, there is no such thing as a nice error, but some nice message to the user, letting the user know gently, the app will just fail. So with TypeScript there is way less risk of doing this. Thanks, Rob. Yeah. Okay, but let's continue. That was derailing a little bit of an off topic about the book. And again, you can get the book with a 20% discount. The link is in the description. I think it's not that I think, it's that the discount will be available throughout the whole stream. So I'm trying to keep it as long as possible so as many people can get the book with a discounted price as they want. Hello from Kazakhstan. Hello from St. Petersburg or from Stockholm now, I don't know. Nice to see you here. Let's continue with an app. I still want to finish it because look what we should have built, and look what we have. It's even broken. So let's fix it. Let's continue. Are you going to upload the source code to GitHub? Yes, exactly. I'm going to upload the source code to GitHub for sure. Now, I was explaining what are the generics. So generics are kind of wildcards, you know, like an asterisk. You know what are the regular expressions where you can have asterisk and it can take it can have any value basically. So same with type variables. But then once it takes the actual value, so for example, you say log string, and then you pass the value to this type placeholder. I think it's the best to think about the generic variables as type placeholders. You say it's a string. Now that's it. T is treated exactly as it would be if it would be a string. So now log string can only accept strings. If you say that it's a number, then it will only accept numbers from now on. And the best part is now you can use this type like it's a regularly defined type. So const foo has a type t, And this type T is only available inside of the log string now. So you can define local placeholders with different names. You can have T, G, S, whatever. Anything. You can have any amount of them. And use them inside of the function. And then when you call them, you can specify the generic variable manually, like log string. This placeholder is a string. Or you can be smarter than this, and you can actually pass a string. Wait, string. You see what happens here? It checks what kind of value did you pass to this function that has a generic argument, and then it just assigns it like a duck typing. Like the first thing that you've sent to it was a string, and then it was like, okay, the value has an unknown type of T, but he sent string, then probably he wants it to be a string. So TypeScript can even derive generic types for you. Okay, is it clear for everyone what are generic types? Because I tried to explain them as best I can. Let me know in the chat, like, is it clear? Or do you want more explanation? Are you good? For example, access response iPerson, and you have strictly type API response. You know that response contains data of the iPerson. It's really useful. Yes, exactly. I totally agree on that. By the way, with this I in the beginning, when I was writing the book, I initially also was following this principle. Like if I have an interface, I would have an I in the beginning. But then I've read that this tradition actually came, I think it's from C#, and there they go further. So for example, if they have a type, type would be called T example. Interface would be called I example. So this letter in the beginning, it allows you to know what is the kind of thing, then what kind of thing are you using. So for example, if it's a constant, then it would be a C example equals a string. You see the point. And then if you use it only for interfaces, then it kind of loses the point a bit. I don't know. So then I switched from this, and now I'm not using I in the beginning, but I used to do it before. Okay, thank you, Luis. Are generic types best practice? Kind of seems close to any type. No, that can seem like they are close to any, but they are not. They're not in any way any, because any literally means any type. But then once TypeScript realizes that T is now a string, so let's say you called log string with a string, that's it. T is now treated only as a string, not as any. You can mess it up. You can say string as any, and now inside of it, T will actually become type any, and then it's a bad practice. But before you do it, everything is fine. Generics are a good practice. You can use them. It is, but I think it's not the best way to define types. I would say, let me formulate. So you should not use generics whenever possible. You should use generics when needed. So sometimes you will see that without generics, you have to write really a lot of code and it doesn't make sense. You can make it simpler, easier, more understandable with generics. And the opposite is true. Today we're covering only the basics of TypeScript. There is a lot more to it. There are so many things. There are, for example, utility types. Utility types in TypeScript. Partial, when you can get only a portion of a type. Like take one type, for example, here is an interface to do that has a title and a description. And then you can get a partial of to do that is a type that allows any of the fields of this type to be optional, for instance. Or you can force the field to be read-only. Or you can take a record. Like, So many things. We're not covering them today, but if you want, I would totally encourage you to go and read up about utility types. Again, to be honest, during my work throughout the day, I rarely use utility types. It's not that you will use them every day. It's good to know that they exist, so that when you see the potential of using read-only, because you really need to ensure that this value or property won't be overridden, then it's good, then use it. But there is a risk of, using them just because you like the idea, like, oh shit, there are so many utility types, I'm now gonna use all of them. That's not a good idea. There should be a good reason of using any of the tools you're using. Generics will make your code more compact and reusable. Yes, I double that. They will make it, but they can also make it less readable if you're not cautious with them. But again, another point. If you're not sure if you need something or not, just try it. Try and see if it's easier to read, if it's nicer to work with this technology. Just hack it and see if it's better now. And if it's not, just revert it back. Anyway, I think it was enough of the off-topic. Let's finish this up, right? So reset screen is not defined. Why is reset screen is not defined? Because we didn't import it. Import reset screen from reset screen. Is not uncitable, does not exist on type intrinsic attributes. That's a problem. We probably, I was explaining generics here instead of writing a component. Let's remove it. So reset screen should be a functional component. There is, by the way, you can define the props on the component differently. You can do it this way. And it will also work. But this is not a recommended way of doing it. In most cases, I think it's only 1 or 2 cases where it won't work as intended. Can I check the type when I defined type example? Ahmed, can you please explain what do you mean here? So we have the type example here. What do you want to do with it? I don't quite get the question. So you can define the props this way as well, but don't do it. The recommended way is to use the FC. Reset screen props, and then the props will be deferred. Winner is not used. So let's start using it. And let's import the FC. Winner is a winner. I read a lot about not using FC and doing it this way. I prefer using FC mostly for consistency reasons. I cannot recall the case where you will have problems with defining props this way. I did it a lot as well. Like at work, I have a lot of components where props are defined like this. One thing in newer versions of React and types for React is that how do you define children? So another example. Let's say you have a component, const some component with children. How do you define children for it? Okay, what is wrong now? Fragment has no corresponding closing tag. Okay, so we have some component with children. You can define the children prop on it. Not using FC seems to be spreading around lately, having to do with typing children. Yeah, okay, look at this. That's exactly what I want to talk about. FC, and then you pass the props, and then you pass props with children. And then you either pass an empty object here, and then if you use children, it will work. And you will have a TypeScript suggestion about it. So this is why I also prefer this way now. That it's functional component with props with children. And here, right now I passed an empty object here, but you can pass, let's say, type some component with children props equals for string. And then I can pass some components with children props here. So that's the reason. I think the reason they say not to use FC is that usually you don't have children. Yeah, you usually don't have it, but okay, let me check something else. Let's remove this props. Let's say that FC doesn't have any specific props there, and then I'm trying to get the children, and it still calculates the React node. Is this the reason? Or why it wants me to have children? Sounds weird. It wants me to have children. Anyway, I don't think it's a problem, to be honest. I still like the FC approach. If anyone can send me an article that explains the point, like what is the problem of using FC or functional component, I would really like to know what is the position about it, because I recently changed my position on this, because before I used to think that I used to prefer the way where I define the props this way. So convince me otherwise, send me a link, please. So it makes it clear that you are not expecting children and you only use FC if you do expect it. That's an interesting point. And then if you try to pass the children, it will complain. Let's try doing it actually. So let's say we have a functional component that returns. Let's experiment. I like experiments, it's fun. We're just gonna return a fragment, and then I'm trying to use some component okay, I'm gonna define it on the top here. Some component with children, and then I'm gonna say test. Children has no properties in common with yeah, that's what I expected. And then if I say FC, you don't have. That's a very good catch. It is something that I'm gonna add to the book now. That's a very good point. I didn't think about it. Thank you so much. Let me write it down. That's so good that I don't want to miss it. Use FC when you want to use children in your component. That's a very good point. You see, I'm also learning during these streams. Thank you. So let's continue. What did I do? We want to show the winner. Can you explain it more? What do you mean? Explain more. What exactly? Can you please re-ask your question? You mean the children, right? I can create another component and show what happens if you use the FC or not FC. So let's say we have some component called example, and it renders some output. Let's say it renders a div, and inside of it, it renders some text. Hello, I'm an example. And right now, I'm not using an FC to specify the type of this component. And if I want to use the props there, let's say props. Example, props. I specify them on the props argument itself. Type example props, and then it has text string. Now I can destructure it to get the text out of it, and then inside of this div, I can actually just render the text, right? Now, let's say that inside of some component, I wanted to render it, and for some reason I thought, okay, it probably accepts children, right? What if instead of passing the text, I'm gonna pass a child. That's gonna be also a div, some piece of layout, child layout. Then, because we are not using FC here, and the only props that are defined are the example props, so you manually defined the props argument, because this is props, to have the type of example props. You did not specify the example to be functional component with generically applied prop types. You did it manually, and now it only knows about the prop text string. It does not know about any other props defined on the functional component by default, like children. But if we would use an FC, like here, yeah, we would have to specify the example props like this, and then boom, the error is gone, because now children are defined by default on this component. When should we use FC or the other way? So if you want the component to accept children, use FC. If you want the component to not accept children and you want to make sure that you never use it with children's passed to it by mistake, then use this syntax. With children, without children. Okay? Can you put test as a child? Nope. Okay, now I can, because it's a functional component, so I can say test. It will work. But if I remove the definition of the example, then I won't be able. So you cannot pass any children at all. So when you use FC, then children will be defined as a React node, I believe. FC example props. You can check the type of the children that React uses by just destructuring the props. Children, and then that's interesting. That's a bit more complex because I was also using this stuff here. Yeah, it's React node. The fact that the variable here will be text or test or whatever does not really matter, because here it will be the children prop. So anything that you put between, like inside of the element, between the opening and closing tag, okay, is a children, regardless of the value. For the component itself, it will be inside of the children. Now, if you pass the text as a prop, then yeah, it will be inside of the text here. So basically imagine that this is the same as doing this. Basically. It is just using a little bit different syntax. Okay, hope it's clear now. So are we good? Can we move on? I still want to finish this application. So remove the example. Example is not needed. We figured out how to use props, right? Is it clear for everyone? How to define props on components, when to use FC and when not to. And I remove the I example. Okay, example props also are not needed. And what is needed? We want to know a winner, and we want to know to have an onReset function. Yeah, it's all good. Awesome. Let's continue. So we have a button that says reset, restart game. Perfecto. Very good. So the button says restart, and also it on click will call the on reset. On click on reset, right? And that should be it. Start. Let's end the game somehow. Bloop. Okay, that's wrong. Let's debug. On game end is assigned, but value is never used. So yeah, this is the bug. Found it. So on game end. On game end. And if it's on game end, we need to set the winner and set the game state reset. Exactly. No, it's not no tie condition. On the board there is a tie condition. We do it by calculating the amount of filled in cells, and if it's 9, like if all of them are filled, then we calculate the tie. The problem that was that inside of the app component I wasn't passing the game end to the game end property of the game board. So let's start. Now it should work. Start, click, clickety click. X is a winner. Restart, and now we can restart the game. Whew. Now all the functionality is in place, but we're still not seeing these beautiful, beautiful animations. Do you want to see the beautiful, beautiful animations? Not sure if you saw my question on app.tsx. Can you explain the syntax inside the board container? It looks like an object with an array at the end. Never seen that. There was, yeah, sorry, I didn't see the previous one, probably just missed it. So the idea here, and as people before mentioned that it's not as elegant as I believe it is, we're defining an object called, not called anyhow, and then we define the fields, start, game, and reset. And then we pass the game state. We take the field called, the name of which we get from the game state variable. The game state variable, or the state, has the game state type, which can be start, game, and reset, exactly as fields on this object. So basically, you're getting a field of an object called whatever is in the game state, right? And then we render the element. Thing is that I don't remember who, but someone mentioned in the comments that every time the app will re-render, we will create another instance of this object, and then recreate all the components there, which is bad. It's not a big deal if you know that this component won't be rendered that often. So it's a hacky solution. I like that it's very compact. The alternative would be to define a switch, the switch statement outside of the render method. Here I'm just being lazy, but I'm being lazy cautiously. I know that it can cause the rendering problems, and it's not a very good, actually it's quite irresponsible. I'm just showing a very hacky way to do something, but I think it's okay because you can do your own judgment. And you can see that, oh shit, I was using this stuff and it caused problems. And it's better than blindly following some dude's advice from some dude from the internet. Yeah, but just be cautious that every time the board, the game component will be rendered, it will recreate the whole block, like the whole object with all the stuff inside of it. And that might be a problem. It's not a problem in this case. Does this concept have a name? I've never seen this pattern. How does JSX interpret the object and an array? It's not an object and array. Look what it is. So let's say we have an object, and the object has fields. Foo, that has the value foo, and it has the field. Let's be more realistic. I'm tired of foo and bar and bus, like name, Maxim, surname, Ivanov. That's an object. Now we can access the individual values of this object using either dot syntax, name or surname, or we can do it using the square bracket syntax, also name or surname. And here I'm passing the string literal here, but I don't have to do it. I can define field name to be a string and having the value of name. And now I can pass the field name to the object and it will still work. So that's exactly what we do in this layout. And it doesn't have to do anything with JSX. Just a reminder that JSX is not a template language. JSX is just a wrapper, not a wrapper, it's just a syntactic sugar around the create element function. Basically, every time you create an element like this, it sort of gets compiled. So this is getting, like on compilation step, it's getting changed into react.create component, create element. There is Babel.js, I believe. Babel.js.io. Let's try it out. And I think the initial example contains React. So look at this. Let's say we define an element called div. It is literally exactly the same as using React create element div and then passing now as props. You see what I mean? So this is literally just a syntactic sugar over this. React.create element. You can do it manually. You don't have to use JSX. Actually, in first years of React, some people were using it without JSX and saying, oh, it's much better. Now they're all defeated. Look at us, people who use JSX. Here you use React create element, start screen. You can pass the component instance. This is why you use capitalized letters. If you would use lowercase for JSX, it would be the same as passing this. And it would create an element type of start screen and then pass no props. Okay, that's a bit about how JSX works. Was it useful to anyone to learn how does JSX work? Yeah, Sebastian, just keep in mind that in some cases you might encounter performance issues. Just keep in mind that the whole object, if the render will happen, it will get recreated again because you're creating it in place. It's not the problem for us because we don't update the props of this component and the state of this component often, but sometimes it might be a problem. Something to be cautious of. Okay, yeah, I'm learning new things every minute, very definitely. I'm very happy, and let's continue with these lessons. What are we doing? Okay, let me recompile it in my head. What is going on? So we have this ugly thing. And we have all the functionality in place. That's the good news. We don't have the animations and we don't have the graphics. That's what we are going to add now. What is your opinion on Cypress for component testing instead of React testing library? I have playing around it lately and really like it much more than RTF. I think end-to-end testing is a great idea. I think Georges Camus was writing an article about testing, end-to-end testing instead of unit testing recently. It's quite good. If you don't read this guy, then you're missing out. His name is Georges Camus. He has a really good blog. Like his latest article is awesome. Like he got injury. He got tunnel syndrome in his elbows, I believe. So it's painful for him to code. And he started coding by voice. Like he's telling the computer what exactly does he want to code. I think it's cool, even though like it's sad that he got this injury. I think it was him who wrote this end-to-end testing article. So yeah, the idea overall is good, but I don't like Cypress. It's funny because lately I started to notice that a lot of people are posting something good about Cypress in Twitter almost every day. But in my experience a few years ago, it has a bunch of problems, like poor Windows 64-bit version support. That was one thing, I believe. Another thing is a lack of multi-tab flows. That was another thing. And I think that was it. So because of those two problems, I switched to Test Cafe and I still prefer it. Maybe I'm now delusional and I should reconsider my opinion regarding Cypress. But yeah, I don't know. Overall, I like the idea of using end-to-end to cover the flow itself, because what we want to ensure is that the user can use your application. And then using unit tests can be misleading. It's hard to write valuable unit test in React application. You have to know what you're doing. With end-to-end, you can exactly check that the whole flow, like the user can log in and you check the whole flow of this event. That's very useful, so I like it. Not for E2E, but you can use Cypress now for component testing even. What? No, I didn't know this. I had no idea. I don't know. Okay, maybe it's cool. I need to check. I will play with it during the week, maybe on the weekend. That's interesting. Anyway, let's start adding the animations. So first, let's fix the initial screen. So when you open it, it should just twin the start game button and not start like this. This is ugly. Would you please push your current progress? Yeah, sure. I just forgot about it. Of course. Let's do it. Git status, git add, git commit, implement, what is it? Tic Tac Toe functionality, Tic Tac Toe logic, git push. Yeah, and only during the stream you can buy the book with 20% discount. I'm talking about my book and about React and TypeScript that I wrote. I actually finished it only a few months ago, like I believe end of September. I finished the GraphQL chapter. There have been 4 revisions, and I'm gonna add more functionality to it. Actually, there was a request that in the first chapter, when you create the cards and lists of tasks in the Trello clone, this one, people wanted to be able to just press enter and add the item there. That was one thing that people requested, and I've added it, and I'm gonna push the update soon. And another thing was that I was using useReducer there, but it was performing mutational updates. So I was mutating the original data while updating it. I did it to improve the readability, basically to write less code and be more concise. But yeah, that was an issue and it's fixed as well. And now you can get the book with the 20% discount. But let's make the app beautiful. Let's go to React resets start screen. Let's begin with the start screen. On start screen, we want to add the styles to the button. As this button only belongs to the start screen, I'm going to define it in place. Let's call it start button equals styled button. And then I define the styles. The styled should be imported from, sorry, that's not what I intended. Should be imported from styled components. And now we define the styles. Border, none. Whoa, border none. Font size, 2 rem, 2 relative units. Basically, it will be twice the regular font size. Cursor, pointer. Font weight, bold. Color. I want to make it a little bit lighter than black, like dark, very dark gray. And background, none. It's not the best usability wise because it's not obvious that it's a button because it doesn't have any outlines and it looks just like regular text, but I'm not a designer. That's the best looking button I could come up with. So let's see how it looks now. Yeah, okay. Now we want this wrapper to have different states. And this is where Framer comes into play. Actually, to be honest, I now have 3 favorite libraries. You probably all know that, or a lot of you folks who are on this stream know that I really like React testing library. Now I also like React Query. You can see the video and the stream about React Query. I did them last week. Now I also like Framer Motion to be precise. Your book is perfect, Maxim. You have no idea how much it helped me. Oh, I'm so glad to hear this because it was a ton of work to write it, a ton of research, but also fun. I really like digging into all these topics. For example, and I continue to learn. Like today, I've also learned. What did I learn? I wrote it down. I learned today during today's stream that using functional component type is useful when you want to show that your component accepts children. I had no idea that people do it this way these days, and it makes sense. So when I was writing this book, I've learned way more, like a lot of things that I had no idea about. So I'm really glad that it helped you as well. Okay, but let's continue. And thanks, Mohammed, for your kind words. I really appreciate it. That's one of the best things of being a teacher or mentor. Like this is why I continue doing it and even starting my course for now only in Russian, but then later hopefully I will localize it and do it in English as well. That's because you get such an intense feedback. Like when people come back to you and say thank you and that you helped them, that's amazing. That's something that is very hard to get when you just write the code for the employer. That's amazing. Another great I've been playing with lately is Immer. I know it's not the newest thing, but makes nested stuff work perfectly and easily without dealing with immutability. Immer is great. I did not use it in this book because I would have to introduce a new concept. And you know, you have to always balance, like, do you want a book that is like 1,000 pages? It's always, it can distort the focus. So in real world application, if I would want to avoid immutability, I would probably use Immer. I don't think there is anything better. I think Immer is better than immutable.js, right? Immutable JS now is kind of outdated. But in the book, you always have to balance it. Like, I'm adding this thing here. Do I want to explain it now? Do I want to like derail the conversation? Like, oh, by the way, dear reader, let's talk about completely unrelated thing now. So it's like, yeah, you always have those questions when developing the applications. For the tutorials. Okay, now what are we doing? In the app, we already have the board container. Now what we want to do is we want to animate the board container states. We're going to do it using the framework framer motion. Using framer motion, we're going to define 3 states: hidden, start, reset, start, and game, exactly for each of the screens. And then we're going to use them. So for the board container, we can actually, instead of div, we can pass motion div. Okay, and what happened? I was expecting it to import. Yes, it imported it, but above React. Motion div, and then we can pass the attributes. And those attributes are something that is framer specific. We want to pass initial state. Initial is hidden. We want the initial screen, like the start screen, just pop up. And then we want the variance. So initial is hidden, and variance is going to be an object. Const variance is an object. And then we have 4 variants. First one is hidden. It's the easiest one. We need to have opacity 0 and and scale 0.8. That's it. When it's hidden, it's kind of transparent and smaller than usual. Then let's say we have start. Start is a bit more complex state because we want to specify a bunch of properties. So opacity is 1. We need to transition from 0 to 1. Then we have scale 1. Then we have width 200 pixels, height 100 pixels. And then we specify what kind of transition do we want. Transition, it's an object with type. By default, if you use opacity with framer, it will be twin, I believe, and then it will be like very smooth. Brrr, brrr. We want it to be a little bit springy, like it's spring animation. It's actually even called spring type. Spring, and duration is a bit less than a second. Okay, and we want to have a comma. Now we can actually specify what state to animate. We've already defined the initial state of the board container. Animate game. Oh, no. Start. Boom. And it's not what I expected to see, to be honest. Initial hidden. Width 500, height 500. That's why it's happening. Yeah, now it's correct. Does the Framer library work with React Native as well? Yeah, it does. If we go to Framer Motion, they have amazing examples. I was blown away when I visited their site. It's crazy. It's looking so good. I hope the transitions will look smooth during the stream. But look, I'm dragging it, and I'm just basically what I'm doing here. I'm changing the values inside of the animate block, and then it's handling the tweening automatically. That's amazing. Then you can also have these kind of transitions. And you see how little, like how small is the code example, and you can do this kind of stuff. You can animate things and also specify how should it treat the children of the element, like should they be hidden, should they appear only after the element is twinned to some specific form, like what should happen. It's so good. I don't know, it looks so great. Then you also have like scroll based animations. Look at this box here. When I'm scrolling, it's updating. And yeah, look at this example. You can replicate the Apple App Store functionality, like when you have daily news or weekly news, like they have something like featured something, and they have this kind of twin there. I don't know, I like it a lot. I think it's awesome. So how do we center the button now? How do we center the button now? We do it by using a bit more style rules. Flex, display flex, justify content, center, align items, center, and I think this is it. Okay, looks fine. Okay, now the problem is during the game state we want to have it to see it bigger. How do we do this? We define the game state. It's going to be an object. Mostly it's going to be the same as start with a few differences. The width should be 500 now, the height should be 500, and I think that's it. But now instead of animating to start only, we will just pass the name of the current state, game state. Now the initial state is start, so the initial state of the board container is hidden, then the initial state in our game state is start, so it will immediately transition from hidden to start and show the start button. Then when we click the start button, it will transition to game, and then it will become like 500 by 500 pixels, and when you win or lose the game, whatever we finish the game, it will show the reset screen. Start. Is it the right screen? Yeah, it is. Now we put the ugly O's and X's, and we have an ugly screen X is a winner. Let's fix the ugly X is a winner screen as well. And now we have the state reset. Whoa, sorry. Beep, beep, boop, beep, boop. Reset. What is the size during the reset? 350 by 300. 300 pixels. Okay, start, bleep, bleep, bloop, 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 bleep. Okay, looks about right. Could you make live about the framer? The joke is, isn't it a live stream about the framer now? Didn't it all of a sudden become a stream about the framer motion? I don't know, maybe it did, who knows. Awesome stream, I've become huge fan since your R3F, yeah, Minecraft tutorial. Thank you, yeah, it's, I actually am quite surprised. If you've seen this, how is it, React 3 Fiber. This is awesome. Literally, it's so easy to create 3D scenes using React. Oh my god, it's so good. I've created a video, for those who don't know, I've created a video how to create Minecraft using React. You can see it on my channel. Where is my channel? I have video. Here it is. Minecraft using React. I'm basically showing how to create a game where you can create blocks with React. And it's like a bit more than 150 lines. It's so compact, it's so easy, it's such a small amount of logic to achieve this. I was just blown away. It's so cool. Yeah, React Fiber is awesome. It's just awesome. Okay, but let's continue with the framer. Now we have 3 states of animation. It correctly animates the start, game, and reset screens. Screens look ugly, and we'll fix it now. The start screen, so the start screen looks nice already. Look at this. I reload the page. This is fine in my opinion, but I wanted to also have a header, TypeScript Tic Tac Toe. How do we achieve this? I want the header to always be around this board container. So I'm gonna define a h1, h1 and say tic TypeScript Tic Tac Toe. Let's see if it worked. It worked. We want to provide the styles for it. So one thing that I want to have is I want to specify the font, the custom font. In the beginning of the stream, I believe a lot of people who started watching it, it's now like 3 hours, probably already disconnected. So in the beginning of the stream, I went to index.html and I've added Varela round font to this application. So that's important. Actually, let me commit and push another change. Git commit, and let's say that here we animate transitions between screens. Okay. Git push. Okay, the repo is updated. If anyone needs it, it's now fresh from the oven. Now, in the app.tsx, where I have this TypeScript Tic Tac Toe header, and I want to specify the correct styles for it, I want to create another style component called heading. So I define another style, const heading equals styled div. What I'm doing, it's not div, it's h1, styled h1, color FFF, text align center, margin bottom for 50 pixels, font size. We want it to be quite big. I found out that for rem, like for relative sizes, like relative size, it takes the regular size of the page, the size of the text on the body element, I believe. And then if it's for rem, then it's 4 times the size of the regular body text size. Okay. Next, we specify the text shadow. It's -3 px and 3 px. This is x axis, this is y axis, and the color is 0000066. So the first 6 digits is the color, last 2 is the alpha channel. And font family is Varela round. T is not needed here, it's not welcome. Okay, and it's not working because I'm not using the heading. Format the document. I'm not using the formatting on save because this way, like usually at work, I format the document on save. On streams, I do it manually to be able to control what is changing on the screen, if anyone wanted to know. So we now have this tic-tac-toe TypeScript. I think it's... Why is it so big? Yeah, it's a bit bigger. You know why? Because of box sizing border box on the original app. But anyway, I'm not gonna fix it now. It's not a bug. It's a feature now. We can no, I'm actually gonna fix it. Box sizing border box. And now they're the same. Now let's fix the game screen, because the start screen already looks fine. Boom, boom. We need to add the assets for the X's and O's. I have them in another folder. I'm gonna copy them. Okay, I'm gonna go to the console, cp tic tac toe ts src close svg src, and then we do the same but with the circle .svg to src. Now we have the assets, and we can start using them. I'm gonna go to the cell, and now instead of the letters X and O, which is ugly, we're gonna use the actual images. Why don't you use rem or percentage instead of px? I think px make it not responsive. You mean for the sizes? Yeah, it makes it non-responsive. I did it because it was... I don't have a good reason for it. I just did it because that was my first attempt, and then I did not think much about it, to be honest. If you think about responsivity, then using percentage or relative items, I think percentage is, or relative items, is better. So if you want, you can fix it. I'm providing the repo. It's up to you. But first, let's fix the mandatory part, the things that need to be done. Import circle from circle.svg. Import cross from close.svg. I think initially it was intended as a close icon. I think I will rename it to cross svg. Now we need to have a container, because it's an SVG image, and by default it won't look too good if you won't wrap it into something that will specify the size and so on. So what should we do is we should define the style for the shape. Const shape equals styled motion img. I'm using motion img because we're going to animate it. We want that popping up effect, right? And I need to import the motion. Import motion from framer. It also is going to have two states. It's going to have the hidden state, initial hidden, and it's going to have a visible state. I'm also going to pass the variance object. And then we need to specify the styles. First of all, the main one what? Okay, I forgot something important. I forgot the curly brackets. I forgot them. Boom, boom, boom. Now it should be fine. And the variance is not defined yet. Yeah, sure. Const variance. Here we define the variance of state. First is hidden, second is visible. hidden is quite simple. Again, it needs to just have opacity. I figured out that 0.5 looks good, so it doesn't transition from like completely transparent something, but from like almost kind of visible. And then transform here is translate 3D minus 50%, 0. We do it to center the element inside of the cell. And scale 0.5. Then there is this visible state. And here opacity is of course 1. Transform is translate 3D same, but scale is also 1. Now we can format the document and we can specify the styles that are preserved between the transitions. For example, it's height 60 pixels. Again, might be confusing, might be not representative, might break the responsivity. But if I define the size of the field as 500 pixels, it's now easier to work in pixels. Width 60 px, position absolute, top 50%. This is what is gonna center it, but it would center it using the left top corner, and using the translate 3D in transition, we centered it relative to the center of the element. RWD, what is RWD? RWD. Can you please tell me what is RWD? Anyway, position is written through the I. Position, top, left, and I think that's it. Why is it complaining? Okay, now it's not complaining. Now, instead of using the O's or the axis, we're going to pass an instance of shape with animate to visible. The initial state of the shape is hidden, so we immediately after we render it, we want it to animate to visible, and we want the src to be circle. And the circle is an imported SVG element. Circle. And it needs to have the closing slash. And here we want it to be another shape with animate visible and src cross. And then we format the document. So if the value is O, then the shape is circle. Otherwise, it's if the value exists, it's cross. Otherwise, which means if the value does not exist, it's null. Okay, why is it expecting an expression? No, it's not. It's just VS Code is sometimes so slow. I don't get it. Okay. Interesting. You know why it happens? That's because the cell should have position relative. Let's restart. Boom. That is good. And X is a winner. That's the last screen we're gonna fix. If you want to ask responsive web design, yeah, exactly. Somehow it didn't click in my head. Why use Translate 3D and not Simple Translate? That's a very good question. If you want to become a front-end developer, it's good to dig into how browsers render stuff. Like, have you ever thought that when the browser fetches the data from the server, it actually gets a text document? Everything. Headers, the body of the request, the response, like everything is just plain text. Then the browser parses this information, and then it has to render it, actually make requests, like talk to the video card and draw stuff on the screen. But before it does it, it needs to position elements, and then depending on how they overlap and how they communicate with each other, can they be positioned on separate layers and so on, they are rendered with different levels of optimization. And long story short, Translate 3D puts the item on a separate layer, and it's faster to re-render its transition. Why use Translate 3D? There is this topic. Translate 3D is faster in most browsers. I was hoping to find some good explanation what exactly happens, why Translate 3D is faster. Okay, force hardware acceleration with WebKit. That's one reason. That's not a very precise explanation of what happens there. Tyler Durden, if you have a good article about explaining like how exactly it works, like why exactly it happens faster, could you please send it if you have a good material? That would be much appreciated. But so far I'm gonna send the David Walsh article because that's what I found by Googling. Anyway, we have only one screen left to fix. Cheers. And we have the reset screen. We're gonna fix it now. Reset screen. Let's actually commit the changes. The changes now are focused around the game screen and where we use the tic-tac-toe shapes. Git commit, add tic-tac-toe shapes. Yeah, there is a little bit of delay between video and the chat. So only now I saw your messages about cheers. I think they use transform property for all effects and it touch only composition state. You're too generous, Maxim. I just really want to finish the app. I really hate when, like, I saw a bunch of streams where people started working on some project and it wasn't finished. Not on this stream. Not on my duty. Let's now render the reset screen. So what do we want there? First, we want the button to look good, and second, the heading. Const winner heading is styled h2. No, that's not what I wanted. You know what's the most annoying for me in software is when a program has a functionality that makes it worse. So for example, in Apple Notes, when you enter how to call quotes, when you enter quotes, regular quotes from the code, and then you copy it and paste, for example, to the terminal, it won't work because it will change the regular quotes on some fancy diagonal quotes or something, and that's very annoying. That's when the program is trying to act smart. Or when I use Google Docs and it's saying, oh, don't use mouse to copy and paste. Use keyboard shortcuts. And I'm like, I know. Don't make me feel stupid. That's quite annoying. But here we want to have basically almost the same as the heading. It's just the size is going to be a bit smaller and the font color will be a bit different. So I'm going to copy it here. Color should be, I guess, what should be the color? 333, kind of dark. I don't want it to have text shadow. And I want it to have margin top 0. And the margin bottom should have the default value. Now we use the winner heading here and here. Alex Paul, you can go all day, just purchase the book too. Huge thanks, bud. I'm really grateful for it. Currently writing some Swift while watching you do TypeScript. Awesomeness. I actually used to write, you probably, as you're writing Swift, you develop something for iOS devices. I used to do it like 7 years ago. I actually transitioned into web development from iOS. But back in my days, we used to write Objective-C. And actually, I like Objective-C still. I think it's a great, very compact syntax, message-based communication that came from Smalltalk. I think Objective-C is awesome. I don't really like C++. Maybe I'm too stupid for it, but I like Objective-C. I haven't tried Swift. Is it nice? Is it nice working with Swift these days? Okay, that's the wrong screen. Start, click, 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 look. X is winner, and now I want the restart button to be on the bottom. And a string looking. Yeah, that's one of the not nice parts of it. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. But still, I used to develop a mobile game called Prehistoric something. It was like a tycoon where you... Wait a second. Maybe I can find this studio and find the game that I was developing. Krivorukov. Yeah, Prehistoric Era. That was the game that I was working on. I used to live in Thailand back then. Adventure Era. Yeah, Adventure Era. That's the name. So thing about this game when we developed it was that part of it was written in C++ and part of it was written in Objective-C. So the code responsible for graphics and gameplay, like visual gameplay, like processing the player controls, rendering the characters and everything like this, was written in Objective-C. And the code that was responsible for game logic, like the processing the state of the game, like how many workers do you have, like how many resources do you have, how many quests have you passed, this kind of stuff was being processed by C++ logic. This was done because we ran the same logic both on client and server, and we used action-based communication system where from the client you send the action, like I did this, I did that, and if you don't have the network connection, you just queue the messages on the client and then send them in a batch, and then server runs it against your state and checks the validity. This is why we wanted to have exactly the same code on C++ code run both on the client and the backend to be able to verify that the sequence of the actions that the client performed is legit. It can be performed and the client was not hacked. That's the idea. I think you like Objective-C because it was one of the early days of your early days experience, has a different emotional touch to them. Yeah, that's very likely. That might be. I also have a very good emotional memories about Ruby. I also like Ruby language. Probably also because it was from my early days. So let's finish this screen and I think we'll be done here. So I want a button to look good here. Also, I think Objective-C gives you a better appreciation of OOP design. I think it's actually like really well built for OOP. That's because it came from the Smalltalk mindset, and Smalltalk is language where, maybe I'm wrong here, maybe I'm making things up, but I believe that's the Gang of Four with their patterns of objective-oriented programming. They were basing their examples on Smalltalk originally. I'm not like 100% sure, but I believe that's the case. Yeah, thank you, Alex. So, how do I style this button? I think I want to have restart button styles. Or actually, this is a good time to reuse the start button. Start screen, I'm gonna take this stuff, copy it. Now I'm gonna create a new file. Start button.tsx, paste it. What I'm doing. And now I need to import styled. And now I need to export start button. And then I need to go to the start screen, import the start button from the start button, go to reset screen, and use the start button here as well. Okay, I don't want to click through the whole game again. So I'm gonna just go to the main screen and set the initial state to be reset. Boom. It is still not looking too good. I'm gonna make them block. That should do it. Okay, I know what I'm gonna do. And justify content center, border, what is it? What is the brand of the wine? It's a Spanish wine, Bicandi Rioja. Ecological wine. Some Spanish wine. Flex wrap column. Flex direction. Yeah, I forgot the property. It's flex direction. Is a winner, restart, and now we need to figure out, will this work this way or not? X is a winner, restart. How do I make a tie? I need to be really careful. I need to be really careful. So I do it this way. Yeah, tie is a winner. That's a stupid phrase. Let's change it to it's a tie. So we will have to change these contents here. We'll do it if winner equals tie, then it's a tie. Otherwise, we need to return another string, and it's going to be a template string where we say winner is a winner. And what? Wait, what? Okay. Format the document, go back, undefined is a winner. Yeah, because I forcefully got into this state. Game state should be start. Start, bleep, bloop, bloop, bleep, bloop, bloop, bloop. X is a winner, and we can restart. Okay, that's actually it. That concludes it. There is a ton of ways to improve this application. You, for example, if you play it right now and look closely, I'm gonna do it like quite slowly. And let's say I'm gonna press X here now. X will win, but it won't be very satisfactory. Like there won't be this sense of winning, because ideally that it would be cool if we would pause for a second and draw this diagonal line connecting all the X's in a row. Boom. Instead of it, it just switches to another, to the reset screen, which is meh, could be done better. Another thing that could be improved is that if I click it, whose turn will it be? It will be X, now O, now X, now whose is it? It's O again. So it would be nice to show the currently leading party. It's quite easy to do, so if you want to improve this application, I would recommend you doing this. You can add high scores. Like there is so many things that could be done. I would also write tests for it, and that's an interesting topic. And maybe next Wednesday we can talk about testing React and TypeScript. What do you think? The most endurant, the most resilient people of my stream. What do you think about the next topic, maybe next Wednesday? So there are two options. Either we talk about testing, or maybe it will be a collaboration with another YouTuber and we are going to build a Django plus React application. What do you like better? We can make it work with sockets. That's a good idea. That's a good idea. Problem with sockets, I don't think there are any problems with sockets, to be honest. It's a good idea. So you like testing more than Django plus React, right? Do you think React is good for static pages? Yeah, I think so. Actually, my website is quite ugly. I'm very sorry for my website. At the moment when I was designing my website, I thought that those lines look cool. They don't. It actually hurts my eyes now. But anyway, this website is done using Gatsby. And the only problem with Gatsby, as I see now, is that it's a pain in the ass to upgrade it. Like every time they have a major version, it's a pure suffering. Okay, let's think about it, about the decision to make regarding the next stream. We can make a poll in my Discord. The link is in the description. You can join my Discord if you're first time on my streams and you didn't know I have a Discord server. Join it and let's discuss what's gonna happen next Wednesday. It's gonna be one of the three things. We can actually cover sockets and Yeah, maybe do it using socket.io. Yeah, why not? Sockets testing or some application using Django plus React, like a Django application with React integrated into it. Maybe. Let's see. Let's discuss. Okay, I think that concludes it. Thanks everyone for joining this stream. That was a lot of fun. How much did you drink? Yeah, half a bottle. That's a good result. Thank you for attending. That was tremendous fun. I hope to see you next time, next Wednesday, same time as today. It was 7 p.m. Central European time, CEST, Central Summer European time. Anyway, I will announce it and send the invitation in the Discord. So join my Discord, the link is in the description. Thank you so much for all those comments. I've learned a lot today, made some notes. Maybe we'll even improve the book based on the notes. You still have a chance to get the book with a 20% discount. The link to the book is in the description. I will remove it, I don't know, maybe tomorrow morning. So up till tomorrow morning, you can get it with a 20% discount. Thank you and bye-bye. It was so nice, so great. I love it.